today's tutorial, we're going to talk about how to practice if you don't have a piano. I'm going to give you 12 ways that you can actually improve your piano skills even if you can't sit down to practice. These 12 practice methods are going to help you improve your skills. Now, I didn't just make these up out of thin air. These are actually practice methods that I recommend to my students all of the time, even if they do have access to a piano. So if you do have access to your piano, you can still utilize these practice methods to get results. Now, I've split these suggestions into 4 different categories. And as I go through each suggestion, I will be really clear on if the suggestion will work for a beginner or for a player that's been at it for a while. So the first category is listening. And active listening is an incredibly important skill to develop when you want to be able to play the piano beautifully. And it's a skill that oftentimes gets overlooked. So my first suggestion is to listen to the piece that you are working on and compare several different recordings. Now, if you're just getting started, you can just pick any piece to do this, but if you're working on specific pieces, I would actually recommend that you listen to those pieces. You're gonna pull up 3 to 5 recordings on YouTube, and you're gonna take notes on each recording. And some things that you're gonna listen for are the tempo, what the performer is doing musically, maybe the different dynamics and articulation, and just the overall feel of the piece. And this will work best if you actually do have an opinion about the recording. It's okay if you hear a recording and you really like it or you really don't like it. You're just gonna throw down all of your thoughts about the recording onto a piece of paper. It's gonna help you learn that skill of active listening. Because you're not just listening in the background, you're really tuning in and listening for specific things. And when you do this, you start to be able to differentiate between the recordings and you start to develop your own artistic opinions about what you like and what you don't like. And that means that when you get back to your piano, you're gonna have a stronger sense of what you want to do with the piece because your artistic voice will be more developed. The second way that you can practice honing your listening skills without a piano is to use a website like teoria.com. This is not sponsored or anything like that. This is just a website that I've recommended for years and something that I've used in my teaching a lot. Teoria.com is an ear training website. Spending time developing your ear will never be time wasted because the better that you can hear, the better that you can assess how you sound at the piano and make adjustments to sound even better. So Teoria.com is awesome because it will help you hear rhythms better, it will help you hear intervals and chords, and if it's something that you really put the time in with, you can get into even more complex things like dictations and whatnot. The third way to practice without a piano would be to listen actively to your piece while following along in the music. And this might sound really simple, but once you've actually done it, you'll see that it makes your brain work in a lot of different kinds of ways. So you can get your music out and you can turn on a recording of the piece. And when I say follow along in your music, I mean like actually keep the beat and don't get lost. And you'll find that if you've never done this before and you're playing complicated music and you turn on the recording and you pull out the music, you're gonna get lost a lot. And just know that that's normal. It's a skill that has to be developed, and the more you do it, the easier it will get. But practicing in this way helps you strengthen all of the different kinds of memory. Your visual memory, because you start to see where things are in the score, and you have to actually keep up with the music. It strengthens your oral or your ear memory because you start to really hear what the piece sounds like without you having to be the one that creates the sound. So many other things. I could go on and on. I could probably do an entire video about this, but just give it a try. All right, the second category is music theory. Now, don't get scared. I promise these are attainable. So the first thing that you can do in the music theory category is analyze your piece. And it depends on where you are in your music studies, but analyzation can be as simple as just looking for different patterns or writing in the note names or writing in the counting. Just, really diving deep to make sense of what's on the page. Analyzation, if you're more advanced, can also be writing in the harmonic changes of the chord progressions or analyzing the form of the piece. And it honestly doesn't matter what level you're at or how you approach analyzing, as long as you take that step to really dive into the music and start to make sense of it in a comprehensive way. Another way that you can hone your music theory skills would be to get a music theory book. And my absolute favorite music theory book is the Keith Snell Fundamentals of Music Theory. And it starts at the preparatory level and goes all the way through level 10. And you can actually just order the book and also the answer key. And so you can go through these on your own. The thing that's so great about them is that they work in a very linear order. As you complete each book, 1, your knowledge of music theory will be greatly increased. 2, the next book will build on the book you just completed. So I would recommend, if you don't know much with music theory, you actually start at the preparatory level. The preparatory level is not like total beginner. I often won't start my students in the preparatory level until they've already been taking for a little while. So even if you've been at it for a while, you could still start with the preparatory level. And I would recommend starting lower than you think you need to do, because you can always skip through things, but you don't want to have holes in your music theory knowledge. Another practice suggestion in this category would be to work with an app like Flashnote Derby, or to do note naming or chord naming or interval naming with flashcards. And I recommend flashcards or an app like Flashnote Derby all the time. If you're a beginner, getting stronger with your note reading is never going to hurt you. And even if you're more advanced, can you really look at all of the ledger lines and know exactly on sight what those notes are? And if you are wavering on that answer, or the answer is a maybe, then you could still benefit from Flashnote Derby or from flashcards. Now, flashcards, the set that I always recommend, not only has notes in it, but it also has intervals and chords and key signatures and all sorts of other music theory concepts that go beyond the beginner level. And so if you don't have a set of flashcards, it's such an affordable investment. I think they're like $5 or $6 US, and they can last you years. And the way that I recommend practicing with flashcards or with an app like Flashnote Derby is pick like 2 or 3 notes or 2 or 3 cards if you're beyond the notes, and work on those for a couple of days until it's super easy and you can get the answers correct within like a millisecond, and then add a couple more flashcards. And I have yet to encounter someone that can't learn and improve their skills by using this method. All right, the next category is rhythm. And if you've been on my channel for a while, then you know how fond I am of rhythm. I used to actually really suck at rhythm, but now I talk about rhythm a lot because it's so important and you don't want to skip over rhythm. And rhythm is amazing because rhythm is something that you can really practice a lot and develop as a skill without ever touching the piano. So one of the ways that you can do this is by practicing with the metronome. And this is for anyone that isn't already completely confident with the metronome. So most people. And I'm gonna give you 2 suggestions in this one suggestion. So my first suggestion is to just clap along with the metronome. Just pick different speeds and clap along with the metronome to get used to the feeling of staying in time and used to the feeling of creating an internal pulse. This will help you build trust with the metronome, and it will help you feel more confident in your ability to stay with the metronome before you even consider adding music and the metronome together. And then once you've done that, actually take your piece of music or a piece of music and start to clap and count the rhythm with the metronome. You can also practice the piece with the metronome. So you can kind of sing along and hear the melody and hear the accompaniment in your head as you have the metronome on, so that you get used to both things existing at the same time. One of the things that I commonly hear when people try to use the metronome is that it distracts them, which totally makes sense. If you're playing a piece and you haven't used the metronome before, and then you add the metronome to the piece, it's going to be really distracting because there's 2 separate things happening at the same time and you're not used to having them coincide together. So if you practice away from the piano, hearing the piece with the metronome and kind of syncing up the sound of the piece with the metronome before you actually try to do it at the piano, you can strengthen the relationship between the 2 so that when you do go to practice it on the piano, it's so much easier. Another way that you can practice without the piano is to get an app like Rhythm Cat. And Rhythm Cat, I think, is technically designed for kids, but I use it with students of all ages and I have fun playing it. It's a game where you have to stay with the metronome, but there's like a backing track that plays music and you get a chance to tap along with the beat, and it's super fun and super engaging. You can start at a very beginner level and go through pretty challenging rhythms in a really fun and engaged way. And the best thing about an app is you could theoretically play it anywhere. Another suggestion in the rhythm category would be to use the book Rhythmic Training and actually clap and count with the metronome every day as a part of your practice, whether or not you have a piano. This is my favorite book. I recommend it all the time, and I've taken so many people from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, and it is wild how good of a sense of rhythm you can develop by spending 3 or 4 minutes practicing this book daily. I actually have an entire video where I talk about the book, I show examples from the book, and I'll link that in the description below. And when it comes to rhythm, I have a ton of videos that will show you how to get really comfortable and confident using the metronome, how to clap and count out loud, how to start thinking about rhythm if it's something that you haven't really paid attention to. And so I'll link my rhythm playlist in the description below as well. And if you can't practice your piano, watching that playlist and going through each of those videos would be an amazing way to improve your rhythm skills. All right, the last category is kind of general music or music history-ish. And I would recommend that you read some books or listen to some podcasts or some audiobooks about music. This is something that will never be a time waster because unless you have a PhD in music history, you're going to learn something when you read these books or when you listen to these podcasts. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of my suggestions, but I would love any of you watching, if you want to throw some more suggestions in the comments, let's get a thread going about your favorite books and podcasts that are all about music. 3 of my favorite books, and I'll link these in the description below. One would be The Heart of a Woman. It's a biography of the composer Florence Price. Her life was incredibly fascinating, and it's a really great book. I love the 3-part series by Alan Walker on Franz Liszt, who's one of my favorite composers. The book Musicophilia is totally different. It's written by a neuropsychologist and it's all about memory in the brain and it's just completely fascinating. Oh, I lied. One more is The Inner Game of Music, and that's a really great book learning how to maximize your practice time. I'll link all of those in the description below. And then some really great podcasts about music would be Music History Monday, Case Notes. There were only a few episodes of it, but it was really fascinating. Connection Experiment, the podcast, which actually features yours truly. That's all about discussing like the deep and vulnerable side of learning how to play an instrument. And then Sticky Notes, which is super, super fascinating. So go ahead and leave more suggestions in the comments below. And if you want more help, like more suggestions from me and more access to other content that I release regularly, go ahead and join my free Facebook group. It is an incredible community of people that are so compassionate and encouraging. We do challenges and workshops and people post videos and ask questions, and it's just the most incredible community in the entire world.